In example 10, we need to solve each inequality algebraically. And while we're going to solve some components of this algebraically, what we really want to do is draw a rough sketch, and then we can answer the question based off of the graph. I really like these questions because this is going to put everything together. We need to know about zeros. We need to know about multiplicity. We need to know about our leading coefficient and degree so that we can determine that end behavior. And so these questions put everything together so that we can make this rough sketch to answer this question. So the first thing we're going to do is find those zeros. So here we have a 0 at x equals 4. And here we have a 0 at x equals -6. Now let's talk about multiplicity real quick. Here at x equals 4, we have a multiplicity of 2. And if I have an even multiplicity, which is that 2 right here, that means it's going to touch the x-axis. So we'll keep that in mind as we're graphing. And then here, when I have x equals -6, I have an odd multiplicity because it has a known 1 right there. And if I have odd multiplicity, that means it's going to cross the x-axis. Okay, so we kind of know what's happening in the middle and what that behavior looks like in the middle. It's going to touch here and cross here. Now let's look at that end behavior real quick. If I was to multiply all of this out, we have 2x's here, 1x here. We would get x cubed and then plus some stuff behind it, right? So let's look at how it ends and then how it begins. To figure out how it ends, we need to look at that leading coefficient. Is it positive or is it negative? So here we have a leading coefficient that is positive, and specifically it is 1. That's a 1x cubed. So this tells me here, when I have a positive leading coefficient, that this graph should end going up. Next, we want to know how it begins, and we want to look at the degree. Is it even or is it odd? So degree, and my degree here is odd because it is 3. It is x cubed. Now, odd tells me it starts and ends in opposite directions. So we already know that it's ending up. So if it is ending up, it means it starts down. Okay, so now let's make our rough sketch. All we really need is our x-axis. And we have an x-intercept at -6 and an x-intercept at 4. Okay, so to draw my rough sketch, I know it's going to end down, and I know it's going to cross through -6. It's going to start down here. It's going to hit at -6 and cross through. And then it's going to turn around somewhere. I don't know how high it goes up, but it's going to turn around and it's come down to this x-intercept here. At this x-intercept, it is going to touch. So we're going to touch at -4 and then turn and bounce back and then end going up. So there is my rough sketch of my graph. So if I am wanting to know when this is greater than 0, we are talking about things above that x-axis. Now it does not include the x-axis. Only the things above it. So that makes it a little bit minorly tricky here. Here it's above at 6 to 4, but at 4 it equals. And I don't want to know when it equals 0. I want to know when it's above. So I'm going to go from 6 to 4. And because they do not equal, we'll have parentheses. So it's going to start at 6, go above it after -6, turn around, touch right here at 4. So I don't want to know when it equals 4 or when it equals 0. So we don't include that 4. And then after 4, it bounces back and continues into forever. So parentheses 4 to infinity. Okay, because we're using parentheses around that 4, that means that that 4 is not included. If this said greater than or equal to 0, then I could just say from -6 to infinity. We wouldn't have to bounce around that 4, but because it cannot equal 0, I cannot include that number. Let's try part B. We're going to do the exact same process. So first, let's figure out our zeros. How many zeros do I have here? I have 4. We have right here when x equals 0. We have when x equals -2. We have here when x equals 4. And then right here when x equals 6. Now, all of these have odd multiplicity. This is to the first, to the first, first. So these are all going to cross. So I'm just going to put right here, all cross x-axis. All of those have odd multiplicity. Okay, now we need to figure out that end behavior. So if I was to multiply, we have -x, x, and x. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 x's with a negative out front. So this would be -x to the 4th plus some stuff. So starting with that lead coefficient, if that lead coefficient is negative, specifically here, it's a -1. Negative leading coefficients means this graph is going to end down. Now my degree, I need to know, is this odd or is this even? This one is x to the 4th. So it is even. And even means they start and stop in the same direction. So because this ends down, they're both going to be down. And of course, if you like this more, you can use this more instead. If you know what's negative and even, we come over here to a negative leading coefficient and an even degree. We know it's this one here. This one was positive and odd. So I'd go positive and odd, and I know it starts right here, which is what we ended up with here. So you can use this one if you like this one more. Okay, so now let's make our rough sketch. We have a 0 at -2, at 0, 4, and 6. I know it's going to start down here, and it's going to cross through all of these. So it's going to start down, then it's going to cross through 2. It's going to turn around, and it's going to cross through negative or through 0. I have no idea how high it's going to go or how low it's going to go, but that's not important to answer these questions. So now it's going to turn around at some point, cross through, and then turn around at some point and cross through. And then it's going to end down, which is what we said it would do. So here's my rough sketch. And now I need to know, when is this going to be less than or equal to 0? So that means we're talking about everything below this x-axis. And because it is equal to, it also includes that x-axis. So we have this portion here. This is -infinity to 2. sorry, to -2, and or equals 2, so bracket. Then we have this loop down here, 0 to 4, brackets. And then we have this loop, or this portion down here, from 6 to infinity. So I really like these questions because now we're putting all of that information together to graphing that rough sketch of what that polynomial will look like.